In the previous video, we discussed how to record and report on your monitoring findings. In this video, we will focus on how to use such findings in your advocacy efforts to strengthen the right to freedom of peaceful assembly. In fact, drafting your monitoring report should not be seen as the last stage of your monitoring exercise, but rather as a first step in a process aimed at bringing law and practice closer to international standards and to good practices on freedom of peaceful assembly. In some cases, the authorities might be receptive to dialogue and developing positive relations with civil society. In such cases, your monitoring findings and recommendations might serve as a basis for constructive discussions and can be used for developing activities for improvement. In other cases, authorities might regard human rights work as a challenge or a threat. The monitoring findings can then be used to publicize the extent of respect for human rights and to highlight any abuses in an attempt to obtain recognition of the issues from authorities, from the public, and potentially the international community. These two approaches are not necessarily or entirely mutually exclusive. A monitoring carried out transparently, accurately, and impartially, presenting a legal and technical argument on potential shortcomings in compliance with international or domestic legal provisions, might be the best way to engage in a constructive discussion with policymakers and to depoliticize freedom of assembly.
OVD-Info is convinced that the information collected is protective. In fact, we believe that if the public knows about detention of protesters, it is less likely that violations against them will go unnoticed. Also, our data at the time of mass arrest serves as a navigator for detainees' relatives, lawyers who want to help, and journalists. In some cases, public awareness helps to prevent serious violations, such as physical violence against detainees, or to document them for the later appeal. Also, we advocate for the state to provide more open data about freedom of assembly. We, as members of civil society, took this responsibility to collect, analyze, and publish available data to inform society about the situation regarding the right to freedom of peaceful assembly in the country.
Legal observers are the eyes and ears of the legal team. Legal observers act as third-party observers of law enforcement interactions with protesters. Legal observers create documentation during events which can later be used in defense cases, public statements, and litigation which aims to hold law enforcement agencies accountable for the actions of their officers.
While a detailed discussion of the various advocacy strategies that exist and their link to human rights monitoring activities is beyond the scope of this course, there are a few things that you should keep in mind while engaging in advocacy as part of your assembly monitoring project. First, your advocacy strategy will very much depend on the objectives you set out for your monitoring project. This objective should therefore be clearly identified before you even start monitoring, as this might affect how your monitoring will be conducted, potentially including on which particular aspects or regional areas it will focus. Defining a strategy as first step is crucial, but it's important to recognize that the strategy may need to be redefined and changed during or after the monitoring phase. Developing an advocacy strategy is a dynamic process that requires ongoing evaluation and adjustments based on feedback and insights from monitoring activities and advocacy efforts. For example, if inadequate police practice is identified as a significant obstacle to enjoyment of freedom of peaceful assembly, improving police practice might become the primary objective of the strategy. Elsewhere, the focus might be on national legislation regulating assemblies.
Monitoring serves as a tool for advocacy. However, it is essential to avoid perceiving the monitoring project as a justification of your preliminary findings. Properly planned and conducted monitoring often reveals other challenges not mapped initially. Careful and grounded reporting is an indispensable tool for advocacy efforts.
It is essential to view advocacy strategies as a work in progress, with constant adjustments made to ensure that they remain effective and relevant to the changing context. In addition, you should design your strategy according to the people that you try to influence, which means that you need to identify clear target groups. Who are you trying to influence? Do they have influence? How can they change the situation? Where are they standing in terms of the issue that you are advocating for? While the opportunities to raise issues of human rights abuses pertaining to the right to freedom of peaceful assembly differ from a country to a country, your target groups might include the parliament, the mayor of the relevant municipality, national human rights institutions, the head of the local and national police, the government ministry responsible for policing, political parties, local branches of international human rights organizations, or civil societies organizations working on human rights issues.
When engaging in awareness-raising activities and advocacy efforts, our target audience is quite broad, as we try to target all relevant stakeholders. This usually includes local and international human rights organizations, the government, the local municipal authorities, law enforcement agencies, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and the Parliament, among others.
Engaging in a stakeholder mapping exercise might be a useful tool to identify your target groups, but also to identify your potential allies and potential opponents. To understand how to conduct a stakeholder mapping and identify your allies and opponents, we invite you to watch the video displayed on your screen. Finally, once you have identified your advocacy strategy, the target groups, allies and opponents, you can start thinking about the targeted means and methods you will use to reach your advocacy goals. Advocacy can take different shapes and formats, such as awareness-raising campaigns, or demonstrations, or position papers, expert meetings, petitions, strategic litigation, and capacity-building activities. A common advocacy method in the context of assembly monitoring projects is the publication and the dissemination of your assembly monitoring reports findings.
Well-documented assembly monitoring reports can raise public awareness of freedom of peaceful assembly issues, or can even be used to highlight practices or advocate for policy changes within authorities. Assembly monitor notes have also been used as evidence in legal cases, and some assembly monitors have even testified at trial. I, for instance, provided a written statement and acted as a declarant during a trial against law enforcement in a case where protesters were wrongly detained in jail overnight to prevent them from protesting again over the weekend.
In addition to public reports, we also issue ad hoc public statements. For instance, if arbitrary detentions, excessive use of force by police, or other human rights violations occur, we can decide to issue joint statements with our partners to inform the public and the international community and to make recommendations to the relevant authorities.
From 2008 onwards, our committee used the hierarchical reporting scheme, depending on the length and the coverage of the project. In case of a significant development, such as a substantial shift in police practice or introduction of a new draft affecting freedom of peaceful assemblies, it is practical to issue a statement before reaching the final reporting phase. Similarly, if a gross violation of the freedom of peaceful assembly occurs, we publish an urgent report and organize a press conference addressing the case. We try to keep the urgent report structurally similar to the final one, including relevant analysis of the violation, excerpts from the observations of the monitors, as well as relevant recommendations addressing the specific violation. Dealing with the issues timely also helps to bring the spotlight of the public before reaching the final stage of the project. Interim reporting and strong monitoring team compliance help construct a firm basis for the main advocacy stage and dialogue with the authorities.
To increase the visibility of your monitoring findings, you may need to promote them to a wider audience. This could involve disseminating your findings to the general public or a specific target audience through various channels, such as local media, international organizations, or by organizing public events. By utilizing these communication methods, you can amplify the impact of your monitoring efforts and increase the likelihood of your findings being acted upon by relevant stakeholders.
Apart from the publishing report and providing copies to relevant state bodies and organizations, it may be helpful to communicate the reports directly with people you know who occupy relevant positions in the said bodies. We would try to keep a trustworthy relationship with such officials and representatives of the police while avoiding any conflict of interest. This practice helps to break the ice in some situations and raises the possibility that the report is thoroughly read and considered. It also helps to hear the perspective in advance and better prepare for the dialogue.
We believe that it is important to collaborate closely with the media when engaging in awareness raising and advocacy efforts, given their important role as public watchdogs. Our engagement includes giving interviews, organizing press conferences, and inviting journalists to presentations of our analytical documents. Human Rights Center staff are regularly invited to participate in TV programs where issues relevant to our work are discussed. We use our website as well as social media and messaging platforms to inform the public and disseminate press releases and other important information.
You might also find it useful to disseminate the findings of your assembly monitoring project with the international community, including international bodies such as the United Nations, the OSCE, the Council of Europe, or the European Union, and international mechanisms such as the Universal Periodic Review. Reports may also be circulated to international human rights NGOs with whom advocacy activities might also be coordinated.
Over the years of our work, we have accumulated a large body of data which we publish and analyze. On the basis of this data, we prepare analytical reports for a wide range of national and international institutions and experts. Such data allows us to identify trends and challenges regarding the respect of the right of freedom of peaceful assembly in the Russian Federation, as well as to argue our proposals to improve the situation. For example, we provided the UN Human Rights Committee with our expertise and data as a civil society contribution for the preparation of General Comments number 37 on the right of peaceful assembly.
In deciding to disseminate your findings with the international community, you should ask yourself whether doing so will in fact help you reach your monitoring objectives. Action at the international level should not be an aim in itself, but it can be an element in a broader strategy for local change. Interventions, opinion, or concluding observations by international human rights bodies might help strengthen the argument in favor of change domestically and can be effective in focusing the attention of state authorities on particular human rights issues.
We share our monitoring findings with the international community since we believe that local authorities might give more weight to recommendations coming from international institutions and non-governmental organizations. We believe that they can play a significant role in advocacy efforts at the local level, especially taking into account their regular meetings with national authorities.
There are many more important considerations to bear in mind when engaging in human rights advocacy. In order to get a more detailed overview of the topic, including how to facilitate cooperation with various stakeholders, we strongly encourage you to watch the video displayed on the screen. This video will provide you with valuable tips and recommendations that will help you in your interaction with relevant stakeholders, ranging from NGOs and international governmental organizations to media representatives and national, regional, and local authorities. In this module, we focused on how to record your monitoring findings following an assembly monitoring exercise, how to draft and structure an assembly monitoring report, as well as how to use such findings in your advocacy effort to strengthen the right to freedom of peaceful assembly. This module concludes our e-course on independent monitoring of assemblies. Thank you for taking the time to complete it. We hope you enjoyed it and found it useful. We now invite you to take the final test in order to receive your certificate of completion. Please make sure to provide us with feedback afterwards, as this will help us to improve this course, as well as other courses on Freedom Lab. We wish you the best of luck in your future assembly monitoring activities.